To do a review of all of the laws and regulations that might limit prescribed burning. So open burning ordinances are big at play in the state, but they're not the only laws that limit prescribed fire. There are many legal bases for regulating prescribed fire, and most of them result in limiting the conditions under which prescribed fires can be conducted. So general tort law is what we just talked about, where personal injury and property damage is governed by a state liability standard. In the states that don't have right to burn acts, there can also be criminal nuisance laws, and those largely apply to smoke drift into communities, but can also apply to escaped prescribed fires, where fire can be deemed a nuisance and someone can have criminal action taken against them for escaped prescribed fire or poorly managed smoke. There's also forest fire control laws. These are best management practices. This interacts a little bit with liability, whereas people become more open to liability if they're not following forest fire control laws. And these can restrict the conditions for burning. Most of the time, they establish wind speeds or relative humidity levels that are, or temperatures that are okay for burning and those that aren't. And a lot of this applies mostly to agencies that are doing burning and not to private citizens. But again, a lot of Western states have vast public lands, and so these fire control laws can limit the amount of prescribed burning done in those public lands if they're limited to doing burning under certain conditions. And then another big one for a lot of states is air quality laws, where states implement plans under the Clean Air Act to focus on control of particulate matter. I know that the Southern Fire Exchange just did a webinar on that a little bit ago, so I'm not going to focus on that a lot, although it's definitely one of the bigger limitations for a lot of states, especially Western states. But I will give a few examples in the slides coming up about how that can affect prescribed burning. And then we also have national environmental laws that can affect the amount of prescribed burning that goes on. Endangered Species Act is a big one. Incidental take during fire is against the federal law of the Endangered Species Act. So a lot of times when agencies are proposing to do prescribed fire on federal land, they will have to do an environmental assessment. If they find endangered species on their land, they have to show why the fire will not cause incidental take. So a lot of times fire will be shut down because there's an endangered species. And then also the Clean Water Act. Best management practices for erosion and sedimentation need to be in place. So in burning in different watersheds, there needs to be some consideration among agencies doing burning that would show that water will not be impacted by sedimentation. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act is one. Its enforcement's pretty spotty from state to state, but the Migratory Bird Treaty Act requires that federal cost share users not have incidental take of birds and bird nesting when they are doing their fires. And so this has been one that's been big in Nebraska, where I work, and really can limit the amount of time that they can burn, because almost everyone there is using federal cost share money to reduce the cedars on their landscape before they burn. So they have a cedar encroachment problem where they're trying to restore rangelands from cedar forests. And so they get cost share money to cut some of the cedars down to create fire breaks so that it's more safe, and then also to increase the intensity of their fires so that they can reverse some of this shift to cedar forest. And they do almost all of their burning in the spring, but at the beginning of every April, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act kicks into place, and then those landowners that are using cost share money have to have wildlife biologists out to the property before they do their burn, and if there are any nesting birds in the area, they are not allowed to burn once the nesting birds move in. And so this can really limit the amount of time that they're allowed to burn. And then there are a lot of different local and municipal restrictions that come into play in different areas. A lot of them are air quality related.